From my phone there, a buddy of mine said his 2-year-old was chewing on electrical cords. He said it was shocking. Said he felt like he needed a grounding for it. But now he's conducting himself properly, so we feel like things are better. Things are better. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable or unalienable rights. Among those are the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In the beginning was matter. Matter begot the amoeba. The amoeba begot the worm begot the fish begot the amphibian begot the reptile begot the lower mammal begot the lemur begot the monkey begot the man who imagined God. This is the genealogy of man. That's a quote from a man by the name of George Smith. In a nutshell, puts the atheistic idea, the idea that there is no God, that this universe is not ordered in a way that there is a divine, intelligent, loving creator. And when you get rid of the idea of a divine, intelligent, loving creator, you then have to concoct some origin narrative by which you will then plant your philosophy and ultimately societies, etc. That narrative that has been given to the secular culture is that there was a huge explosion some 13.8 billion years ago, and that explosion, having no intending mind or intelligence behind it, caused the universe that we see, that life evolved from non-living chemicals, and that life rose up to where humans are. But Charles Darwin would say that there is no ultimate foundational difference between humans and animals. It's just that we happen to be smarter. And so you have the idea of two worldviews. One says that there is a God, a supernatural creator that made humans in his image. You have the other that says humans evolved literally from primordial slime and rose up from that slime base to be what they are now. And those two ideas are going to affect the way that you think about humanity and the way that you value humanity, the way that you see humanity's responsibility. What happens when a group of people, a society, a culture decides they want to get rid of the idea of God and adopt a godless worldview that doesn't give them a foundation of human value? What happens when you try to get rid of the image of God? That's what we're going to be discussing. Now, I'd like to just start by going to Genesis chapter 1. You look at verse 26. You guys are very familiar with this. Let's read it together. There in Genesis chapter 1. The statement is made and repeated in any number of significant ways in the creation account, that humans are not animals. They are different than animals. Their value is different. What they can do and what they don't do is different. That God expects something from humans that He does not expect from any animal. You often will read the modern scientific discussions that say humans are a smarter ape or like the other animals. Okay, humans are not like other animals because humans are not animals. They're in a different category. They're not just one level up. It's not that you happen to have a higher IQ than a chimpanzee that was sitting beside you. It's that not only do you have a higher IQ, but you have a difference of reality, a difference of conception. You have different abilities of moral sensibilities. You are different. There's not the same kind. It's a difference. And so God tries to make that clear there in Genesis chapter 1 where He says, verse 26, therefore let us make man in our own image, in our own likeness. Let us make him. And as you read that passage, According to our likeness, let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and over the cattle, over all the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in His own image. In the image of God He created him. Male and female He created them. Now I'm just going to put here that lots of times the God of the Bible and the writers of the Bible are accused of being sexist. They're accused of saying that women are less valuable, that women are not as important because there's a difference of roles in the New Testament church. We are accused of devaluing women. The Bible absolutely does not do that. In fact, what you're going to see is one of the most powerful statements of gender equality ever penned in any type of ancient literature ever written, where God says, God created mankind in His image, male and female. He created them. Humans have the exact same value regardless of gender in God's sight from the beginning. Always, both male and female have been created in God's image and are equally as valuable. And so, that first statement, you have qualities of a divine creator that sets you apart from all the other creation. In fact, hey guys, you're in charge of the other creation. You're supposed to subdue it, have dominion over it, understand it. We have gotten some of that messed up in our modern society. When you go to Genesis chapter 9 and God reaffirms this, hey, even though sin has come into the world, humans are still made in God's image. It's still very different between an animal and a human. And He tells Noah and his offspring, I'm giving you every single one of the animals to eat. But any person or animal that kills a human, that's extremely different, and they'll be brought into judgment. He says you can kill every animal there is, and you can eat it. You'll let that sink in. Our culture is really trying to tell us that some animals are as valuable as people. In fact, our culture in many cases is trying to tell us that some animals are more valuable than people. You can literally murder 800,000 unborn babies in the United States of America, and the government will pay you for much of that. If you hamper the development of a bald eagle's egg, you can get fined $10,000 or more and go to jail for 10 years because you messed with a bald eagle's egg. Now, that's a cultural misunderstanding of how and where humanity fits into the scheme of the universe. And so let me just show you. Here's what I want to do. This is actually going to be kind of a little bit more scientific approach to. I'm going to show you where the idea of atheism, the ideas of atheism and evolution are trying to get rid of what makes humans human, and how they are trying to negate the image of God and make people believe that and get them to behave like that. That's what I'm going to do for you. And so we're going to be looking at what's going on in this idea of us being made in the image of God, and what happens if you buy into the atheistic, godless idea that humans evolved from primordial slime over billions of years. What happens? This is a statement from a girl by the name of Leah Libresco. She was a very, very popular writer on the Atheist Portal. And she said, hey, I always try to look at things from a scientific nature. Like I try to see something and find the correct answer to that. And she said, I've found something that atheism has no explanation for. It looks like to me that there are objective moral values, that some things are absolutely right and some things are absolutely wrong. And atheism can't give you that. If this world doesn't have a creator, if there is no objective moral values from the beginning, then humans would just have to make them up along the way. And if one human group made one up and another human group made another one up, there wouldn't be any objective standard between the two groups. And so one group would be just as good as another group. But she says, we know that's not right. We know that if a group does certain things, regardless of whether they think it's right or not, it's wrong. And of course, probably the best example of that ever would be the Nazi Germans, where they were doing all kinds of things and they were brought to trial in that world stage where they were put on trial for crimes against humanity. And Robert Jackson, who at the time was the attorney that was trying some of the biggest Nazi leaders, basically said, hey, you've committed crimes against humanity. And the Germans said, no, we didn't. This was legal where we were. The higher ups in our culture said it was fine. And he said, yes, but you have violated laws that are superior to any local government, and they stretch beyond all geographical boundaries. Well, where would anything like that come from? And that's the problem with atheism. You can't get that from anywhere. And Leah Libresco knew that. And so she said, basically I'm just looking at this from a scientific perspective. I'm really sure that morality is objective. Human independent, something we uncover like archaeologists, not something we build like architects. She says, here's what I know. It is morally, objectively wrong to beat a 3-year-old for fun. I know that. Now, I'm going to find a system that shows me why that's correct. So she said, as you read her article, she said, I went to the atheistic community and said, okay, show me why that's wrong. And basically the answer was, well, you can say you don't like it. You can say it'd be better for society if it didn't happen. No, she said, I want to know why it's wrong. And she basically was told, well, you can't say it's wrong objectively, not in the worldview, not in the frame of atheism. She said, okay, then I'm out. Because I know it's wrong, so I've got to find where you can say that. And so she becomes a believer in God because the system in which humans are created in the image and likeness of God, and there is objective moral value that comes from the nature of God, that is the only system in which you can say, this human is saying he's doing this and it's fine, but you have a standard outside of all human independent, that says no. Just because somebody says that they're fine with it doesn't mean it's right. And so she stops being atheist and she becomes a believer in God. Now, this man's name is William Provine, and he delivers the Darwin Day address in 1998 on the University of Tennessee's campus. Now, they have these every year. One of the debates that I was in 2009 on the University of South Carolina, it was for the Darwin Day celebration. It was the Apostafarians, a secular group of students there, were putting this on as a celebration of Darwin Day. And here's what he says in his speech. He says, naturalistic evolution. Now, naturalistic means no God's involved. It's the idea that humans evolved from primordial slime billions of years ago. Now, let me say this, just as an aside. Science, real science, and Christianity correspond beautifully. They dovetail perfectly, and nothing in science in the natural world has ever or will ever disprove anything in the Bible. Here's one, and this is sad, but our young people don't know that. Because what they're told is evolution is science, religion and Christianity is faith, and the two are separate, and you've got to find some way to shove them together even though they don't fit, or you got to pick one of the two. Now that's false. Real science. Look, naturalistic evolution, there's a law of biogenesis that says you can't get life from non-life. Evolution says you have to. The second aspect of the law of biogenesis says life produces after its own kind. Evolution says you have to get life to produce something other than its own kind, and you got to get it to do that millions and billions of times. And yet we've never seen it ever happen. You have to get genetic mutations to add massive bulks of complicated information. We've never seen it do that at all. The real science doesn't get you this. So don't mistake what I'm saying as, okay, science says this, the Bible says this. No. Naturalistic science that has rejected a pursuit of truth says this. Okay, you following that? That no God's worth having exists, that there's no life after death. Number 3, no foundation for ethics, no meaning in life, and human free will is non-existent. Now, he summarizes what the atheistic worldview is trying to get across. Number 1, you can't say anything's ultimately right or wrong. Number 2, there's not going to be a judgment. So do what you want while you're here. And number 3, if you really do believe this, you've never actually made a choice in your whole life. The physics and the chemicals in your brain are the things that are controlling you, and there's no human free will. Now notice how that would contrast with the view that you're created in God's image. What you do is your responsibility. And you do have free will. And you can make a choice. And there is something that's right and wrong, and you're supposed to choose what's right. And if you do choose what's right, then there is an eternal reward for that choice. Now, don't take this guy's word for it. We're going to flesh this out. Dan Barker, in a debate with Peter Payne, Dan Barker is the co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, one of the largest groups of unbelievers in the nation out of Madison, Wisconsin. He's in a debate with Peter Payne, and he says there are no actions in and of themselves that are always absolutely right or wrong. It depends on the context. You can't name an action that's always right or wrong. I can think of an exception in every case. He says all behavior is situational, all of it. Objective moral values do not exist. He says sometimes they seem pretty clear, but I can give you an exception in every single case. So a student comes up to the microphone at the 2005 debate, and he says, all right, can you just tell me when rape would be okay? When would that be moral? Barker says, well, you know, some of the stuff's kind of so outlandish, it would be hard to think something up, but I can think of it. Okay, if aliens came down and said, unless you do that to one person, I'm going to kill all of humanity, it would be morally right to do that. Okay, that's what he said in 2005. When I debated in 2009, I said, what about 2 people? He said, yeah. I said, what about 2,000? He said, yep. I said, what about 2 million? He said, I would hate it, but it'd be your moral obligation to save all humanity, to commit that act to save all humanity. And he could tell that the audience that was made mostly of New Testament Christians was getting angry and was appalled at the discussion. And he looked at them and then looked over at me, and he said, you know, there were probably 850 people at the debate, and he said, but you'd thank me because I'd save your life. Okay, now here's his problem. From an atheistic perspective, if there's no God, if there's no eternal anything, and there's nothing after this physical life, what's the most valuable thing you got? Physical life. And so you fight to preserve physical life no matter what, because after that you don't have anything. If there's a soul, though, and that soul's created in the image and likeness of God, then physical life is not the most valuable, and you preserve morality above physical life because the value and health of your soul is the most important. And he looked over at me and he said, but you thank me because I'd save your life. I said, no, I'd never thank you for doing something wrong. Because I know I've got somewhere to go after this life. He said, you don't know that. And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. I said, I do know that. See, if you do know that, if there is a soul, then that matters how you respond to the world. And so if you just took Barker's idea there, okay, so as long as you preserve physical life, well, you could kill 49%, 4.5 billion people, if it would save the lives of 4.6. You see, there's no stop to that. You could commit that horrible crime against every person on the planet as long as it saved their physical life. Well, and then just start listening. Okay, well then do that and then beat them. Do that and then beat them and put them in slavery for 2 years. Do that and beat them and put them in slavery for 2 years and starve them almost to the point of death. Do that. So there's no line at which that stops if, yeah, but it would save their life, it would save your life. And so if there's something more valuable, more important than physical life, which there is, then there's a standard outside of humanity, human independent, that says, no, you can't do that regardless of what the physical consequences are, because there's moral consequences here that are more valuable than the physical consequences. You understand that? Charles Darwin said, a man who has no assured and ever-present belief in the existence of a personal God or a future existence with retribution and reward can have for his rule of life, as far as I can see, only to follow those impulses and instincts which are the strongest and seem the best to him. Okay, you see what getting rid of the image of God does for you. Charles Darwin says, okay, if humans aren't made in God's image, and they don't think they're going to go to heaven or hell, how do you determine how you live every day? Well, you wake up and do what you feel like. All right. Several years ago in Montgomery, there was a couple of guys who saw a man's truck that they wanted. These two guys saw him get in his truck. It's a brand new Ford truck, if I understand it right. His wife had sent him a text and asked him to stop by Walmart and get bread and milk. He parks his truck, goes into Walmart, gets bread and milk, comes out. The two guys shoot him and take his truck. What's wrong with that? Well, if you don't think there's a heaven and hell, and you don't think that they have done anything morally wrong, here's what you do then. From an atheistic perspective, you say, well, I wouldn't want that to happen to me, so I'm going to put regulations in. I'm going to try not to get shot when I buy a new truck. I don't like that. I don't think it's best for society. Hold on, did they do something wrong? They were following the instincts and the impulses that seem best to them. Do you know, most of the time, we're not stretching it all the way to, hey, go shoot somebody and take their truck. But our public system is basically, our public school educational system across the country in a lot of ways is saying, just do what you feel like. If that's how you feel, I can't tell you your feelings are wrong, and you just act on those feelings. Now, we'll get into some more of that in the next session, but that's what's being told to our young people. Hey, there's no objective human independent standard, and so you just do what you feel like because there's not coming any type of judgment. The secular society in England put on the side of the buses several years ago now, there's probably no God, so just live how you want and have fun. Okay, you know, that's all fine and good until somebody decides, hey, the way that this person decides he's going to have fun is steal from you. The way that this person decides he's going to have fun is exploit people and put people into human trafficking. The way that this person decides that he's going to have fun or she's going to have fun is, okay, where's that line stop? Who's defining fun? Live how you want? Well, that's all well and good until you start seeing people that you know are violating some type of objective moral standard. And if you're going to be honest with yourself, you have to say, no, I know that's wrong. And if atheism can't give me I know that's wrong, then I got to find somewhere that can. This was fascinating. It's a fascinating story. I don't have time to tell it. Really, really neat story ultimately. But Jeffrey Dahmer's on the Stone Phillips interview in 1991 after he's killed 19 different young men and boys. And Stone Phillips asked him while he's there, he says, when you were doing this kind of stuff to these people, what made you think you could do that? And here's what he said. If a person doesn't think there's a God to be accountable to, then what's the point of trying to modify your behavior to keep it within accepted ranges? That's how I thought anyway. And then he goes on and asks him, he says, you know, so what were you thinking? He said, well, I just thought, I always bought evolution, and I always thought what one blob of primordial slime did to another blob of primordial slime didn't make any difference. And so Stone Phillips says, well, when did you stop thinking that? When did your idea of that change? Now, this was fascinating. Let me give you a little background to this. I started at Apologetics Press in January 2000. In our card catalog, we had some things saved, and I pulled out a manuscript that had Lionel Dahmer's name on it. And I didn't know who Lionel Dahmer was. Come to find out, Lionel Dahmer was Jeffrey Dahmer's dad, who had interacted with us there at Apologetics Press years before I got there. But Jeffrey looks over at his dad when Stone Phillips asked him that question and says, Dad, when you sent those creation science materials to me, if I understand it right, some of those were from Apologetics Press. He said, and when I realized evolution was not true and that there is a creator and a God, he said, I realized I had done something terribly, terribly wrong. Okay, when you think there's no God and one blob of primordial slime is doing something to another blob of primordial slime, who cares what slime does to slime? When you think you're made and created in the image and likeness of God, and every single person is as valuable as you are, and has a soul that is so precious and so invaluable that Jesus Christ would die to buy that soul back from sin, well, then it makes a big difference how you treat somebody else. Friedrich Nietzsche said, we believe that severity, violence, slavery, danger in the street and in the heart, secrecy, stoicism, tempter's art, and devilry of every kind, that everything wicked, terrible, tyrannical, predatory, serpentine in man serves as well for the elevation of the human species as its opposite. He said, you know, if atheism is true, we got to get beyond this outdated, archaic, false idea that there's objective truth and that there's objective morality. He said, if those two guys, basically, let me put together what he's saying. If those two guys were smart enough to kill the guy in the truck and take it, then they might have eliminated some genes in the human gene pool that would cause humans not to be as smart or be as fit to survive. And so they might have actually been doing something great for humans. So before you say, hey, it was wrong that they shot that guy, maybe you should be thinking, hey, they might have eliminated some genetic material that could cause humans to be less intelligent. They might have just done us all a favor 1,000 years from now, 2,000 years from now. You see the problem with that? You just then start making up what you think is going to do humanity a favor in 2,000 years, and if you like it, you do it. Now, this is not Kyle Butt making this stuff up. That's what I want you to see. This is the highest level of thinkers in the unbelieving community. This is the top. They're admitting this to you. If you were sitting down across the table from these guys and you said, so does that mean a person that shoots somebody else hadn't done anything morally wrong to take their truck? And they'd have to be like, well, we don't like it. No, it doesn't mean they didn't do anything wrong. Well, we're trying to stop it. Doesn't. No, they really hadn't done anything wrong. Because we really need to get beyond this idea of good and evil. Here's their problem. Michael Ruse is an atheist, but he says, a man who finds it acceptable to rape and kill little girls is just as wrong as the man who says 2 + 2 is 5. He says, hold on, guys. We know there are some things that are wrong. You know what Ruse's problem is? But according to my atheism, I can't get it. I don't know why that's true. I don't know how I can say that. I just know it. You know why you know it? Because you're a human. And humans aren't animals. You see, animals do all kinds of stuff, and they don't feel any type of moral compunction when they do it. But you know that's wrong. Now be honest with yourself and find a worldview that will show you why that's wrong. And that's what is being said here. Darwin says, of course, like I mentioned, there's no fundamental difference between man and the higher mammals and their mental faculties. If there's not a God, and you're not created in his image, then you take the smartest animal, you put that smartest animal next to you on the pew, and you're just more intelligent, but there's not a fundamental difference between you. And here's how that works. Right now, we kill 800,000 babies in the United States of America. Across the world, it's way more than that. I think China terminates 2 million or more pregnancies every year, and that's just the ones that get reported. You're probably talking in, I wouldn't even venture a guess. I have no idea. Worldwide, if I understand it right, it's in the tens of millions of babies that people kill. Barbara Burke says, among some animal species, infant killing appears to be a natural practice. Could it be natural for humans too? A trait inherited from our primate ancestors. Charles Darwin noted in The Descent of Man, infanticide has been probably the most important of all checks on population growth throughout most of human history. Okay, listen, here's what you know. My parents, years ago, had a coon dog that, her name is Queen, had a pedigree as long as your arm, won all kinds of night championships, and she could find a coon anywhere in the county. That was the problem with her. She would find a coon anywhere in the county. You know what they say a good coon dog is? One that it'll go maybe a mile and realize it's gone too far and it'll come back. No. This dog, if it didn't find one in a mile, it went 2. If it didn't find one in 2, it went 3. It'd be 10 miles away from you, treeing a coon. But had won all kinds of stuff, super expensive. The puppies from this dog back in the day were going to be $1,000 a piece. And that was a lot of money. You're talking 30 years ago or so. She had a first litter, had 12 babies. My dad thought, this is awesome. It's $12,000 right there. She ate all of them but one. What do you do to a coon dog that eats every one of their babies except one? Try her for murder? Put her in jail? Try to make her feel the injustice of what she's done? You don't do any of that. She's an animal. You breed her again. She had 8 babies the next time. They thought maybe because that was her first litter, she only felt like she could keep one, but maybe the second litter, she felt like she could keep maybe more than one. Maybe she felt like she had more resources. 8, 7 of those. That's the last time they bred her. I think they sold her quickly after that. Nobody came to arrest her. Nobody came to try to explain to her or talk sense into her about how wrong she had been. She's an animal. You understand the difference. Barbara Burke does not. Because she's bought into the idea that humans are just animals. They're smarter, they're more powerful, they're better at surviving. But really they're just animals. There's no difference. Okay, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. If you get rid of the Creator, what else do you get rid of? The inalienable rights. You get the Creator out of the picture, then humans don't have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Then humans with disabilities or the ones that aren't going to help society, they can be eliminated to be replaced by ones that are smarter and will be more helpful to society. I'm going to shift gears here now, and I'm going to show you some stuff that when I saw this research, I was like, man, how do you look at this and not understand what the import of it is? Okay, so if you are a person who doesn't believe in God, you believe humans literally evolved from primordial slime, where in the world does the idea of God come from? Well, you got a bunch of atheists who are doing some research on kids. And here's what Sam Harris says in his book, The Moral Landscape. He says, several experiments suggest that children are predisposed to assume design and intention behind natural events, leaving many psychologists and anthropologists to believe that children, left entirely on their own, would invent some conception of God. Now watch, Paul Bloom is the guy behind this. There's now a large body of research suggesting that humans are natural-born creationists. Now these guys are as atheists as the day is long. They can't stand saying this. It hurts them to admit it. When we see non-random structure and design, we assume it was created by intelligent design. From the beginning of creation, God's invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things which are made, even His eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. You come in to the world pre-programmed to recognize the truth, that when you see design, it demands intelligent design. Intelligent design. Why is the human mind, at least the Western Protestant mind, so susceptible to creationism and so comparatively resistant to naturalistic explanations for the origin of species? We don't understand it. We get to have these kids in our classes for decades. We teach them for 13 years, and we can't beat out of them the idea that there's a creator. In fact, we're only successful, they go on to say in the research, we're only successful with half of them, and then we're not completely successful. Christopher Hitchens and Sigmund Freud was quite correct to describe the religious impulse as essentially ineradicable until or unless the human species can conquer its fear of death and its tendency to wish thinking. Neither contingency seems very probable. You're never getting rid of the idea that there's a God. We can't remove it in any way we know. Watch this. Oh, where's his quote? I hope I get to his quote. Maybe I will. Richard Dawkins says, why, if it's false, does every culture in the world have religion? True or false, religion is ubiquitous, so where's it come from? He says, all right, guys, it looks like humans are born believing there's a God. We can't really even get it out of most of them. And this is not Western specific. This is every human being that's ever been born on the planet throughout all of human history. They're all religious. And then he says, if evolution were true, it would eliminate things that were costly and useless. You know, if evolution's true and you are less fit in some way, you get eliminated in something more fit than you. So we should have the fittest human beings on the planet right now, but those human beings, every one of them, think that there's a God for the most part all across all the cultures, and they spend all kinds of energy and money and resources on that belief. If evolution is true, why do they do that? And he says, well, we don't have any idea. Evolution, oh, I love this right here. Evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins was right to complain. Read this. I can't even believe they say it. That it seems as if the human brain were specifically designed to misunderstand Darwinism. Okay, if God creates humans in His image, and He plops them on a planet where He wants them to come to the conclusion that He exists, and that will be the foundation of everything they do in their lives. Does it make perfect sense that He would pre-program the human brain to misunderstand falsehood like Darwinism and to understand the truth that design demands an intelligent designer? Doesn't that make perfect sense? Makes no sense according to evolution. If you evolved from primordial slime, where would the idea of a God come from? Why would you need one? It's so costly, why wouldn't it be eliminated by now? We can't explain it. We don't understand it. Now, the Christian can explain it very easily. That's exactly what you would expect from a loving God, to pre-program humans to come into the world with a brain that was specifically designed to misunderstand falsehood. That means if you then eventually adopt it, whose fault is it? It's not God's. Well, now let's get to the next point. Children are native teleologists, and many of them never grow out of it. They're born believing in God, and most of them keep that belief till they die. Well, I'm going to skip this one, although that's a good one. We're going to go to human free will and ask the question, okay, what does this have to do with anything? I am doing some research for Freed-Hardeman for a doctoral program, and the research involves interviewing 15 people. It was just as many as we could get at this time as 15, who were members of the Church of Christ who are now atheists or agnostics. And asking them basically, what's your story? Why did you leave the church? Why did it have anything to do with specific teachings from the Church of Christ, or was it general stuff like the problem of pain and suffering, etc.? And across the board, most all of it was general unbelief like you would see in the culture. In fact, I found it fascinating that several of the people that I interviewed said, hey, if the Bible was the Word of God, we feel like the Church of Christ would be the one. We feel like is following the stuff that the Bible teaches the closest, but we just don't believe the Bible anymore. We just don't believe that God exists, etc. But one of the guys made this statement. He said, when I realized human free will does not exist, that's the point at which I said, hey, I can't believe in God, can't believe in the Bible, because there's no human free will. Now, that may sound outlandish to you. And I say that because this, I feel like, is such an intuitive and easy to understand idea. Why are you here this morning? You chose to be. Why didn't you smack the person sitting next to you this morning? You chose not to. For some people, it's a harder choice than others. And some people, no, my wife, if she was sitting, I'm just saying, she would have to fight impulses to, anyway, forget it. Sometimes I would do things that would make her want to probably smack me, but she doesn't, is the point I'm trying to make here. Okay, why do you do what you do? Here's what I think all of us recognize. Here's what we all understand. We come to a fork in a decision and we realize I should do this, I shouldn't do this. And we don't feel like it's the chemical soup in our cranial cavity that decides whether we do what we do. And that's why we feel guilty when we make the wrong decision. And that's why we feel like, oh, okay, we did something good when we make the right one. Now, according to atheism, you can't have free will. Because if the material universe is all there is, there's no soul or spirit in your body. There's nothing supernatural. And so the only thing that's controlling you is the chemicals in your brain. And so Sam Harris writes a book. He says, free will is an illusion. Our wills are simply not our own making. My mental life is simply given to me by the cosmos. Am I free to change my mind? Of course not. It can only change me. He says, if evolution is true. Now remember what William Provine said in the Darwin Day address. It's interesting that his whole discussion was to try to convince his audience of the last point he was making. No human free will exists. That was his whole discussion on Darwin Day in 1998. Now here's what I find so interesting. Why you try to convince them? If human free will doesn't exist, whatever you believe is what you believe. You can't help it. And so you're going to stand up here and try to convince me for 45 minutes that I don't have free will. If at the end of that I say I still do, but you think I don't, who says? Continue with me. William Provine, naturalistic, that's what I just... Free will is a disastrous and mean social myth. Now stop right there. If you get rid of free will, whose fault is it when you sin? Not yours. It's the cosmos's. It's the slime you evolved from. It's the sugar molecules in your brain. Why'd you do that to that person? I don't know. Next time, don't do it. Can't help it. What Provine was getting at is if we evolved and there is no God, then free will doesn't exist. And this idea of a justice system where people get what they deserve or justice is meted out, you can't do that. They just happen to run afoul of the right chemicals. You got the right chemicals in your brain. Theirs are a little bit scrambled. And so you do the right thing, they don't. You can't say they do anything wrong. You see, what's the difference between the atheistic idea and the idea that you're made in the image and likeness of God? God demands. In fact, the death of Jesus Christ and the existence of hell is the divine monument to your ability to choose what you want to do. God put you here with the same ability He's got to make a decision about what you're going to do. You'll remember maybe over in James chapter 1, he says, by His own free will, He brought us forth by the word of truth, that we may be kind of first fruits of His creatures. Therefore, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath, for the wrath of man does not. Of His own will He brought us forth by the word of truth. You know what that means? He didn't have to. Nothing constraining God to create the church, to buy you back from sin. There's nothing that would be missing from God if He didn't. Do you know why God made a plan of salvation? He wanted to. That was it. He chose to. He has the ability to choose, and that's what He picked. If you're made in the image of God, you got the ability to choose. Now, here's what you and I both know. You know we hadn't done it. But if you can choose right one time, could you choose right twice? And if you could choose right 2 times, could you choose right 3 times? Now, all of us at some point have chosen wrong. But it's not because we had to. It's not because we didn't have the capability to choose right. It's because there was something in us at that point that didn't want to do the truth. Now, here's what makes Jesus different than you. He had the ability to choose right once, and He chose it. And He had the ability to choose right twice, and He chose it. And He had the ability to choose right 3 times. He picked right every time. He was trying, the point of Jesus Christ coming to this earth was to show you that it could be done. And that you didn't do it. I didn't do it. We could have done it, but we didn't. But Jesus did. Now, that's because we got free. I'm a determinist, Barker says, which means I don't think complete libertarian free will exists. Since we don't know the future, we have the illusion of free will, which to me is actually what free will means. Oh, that's cute right there, isn't it? I mean, no, not trying to be, but the illusion of something is what it really is. Let's see how that works. You've been on the desert sand for the last 3 days. You haven't had anything to drink. And you look up and there's the illusion of a cool, crystal pool of water. And you run as fast as you can and you dive into that illusion of water and you start throwing it into your mouth and you realize it's not water, it's sand. Do you live or die? You don't live. Yeah, but it's the illusion of water. And to me, that's all that water really is. You see the problem with that? Okay, here's what in fact, here's what the bulk of the atheistic community recognizes. You can't live thinking you don't have free choice. You can't even live like it. And so, you tell yourself you got it, even though according to atheism, there's no possible way you can have it. Let's be honest here, guys. If every single person recognizes that they make their own choices and atheism will not allow for that, what's the problem? Is it this problem with every single person on the planet? Or the false idea of atheism? That's where the problem lies. So basically what they say is, well, we're going to start with atheism, and yeah, it looks like everybody's got free will, but they don't really because atheism won't let it so. Hey, you just have to act like you got it. You see the problem with that. Well, let's continue. Now, Jerry Coyne, this was interesting. He was given this speech at the 2015 Imagine No Religion Convention. He said, you don't have free will. He stands up to everybody, and he says, many of you don't accept what I'm about to say. You don't believe that you're robots made out of meat, which is what I'm going to try to convince you of today. Our behavior is absolutely determined by the laws of physics. Fascinating. Why are you going to try to convince me of that? I mean, if I can't help it, What are you doing up there? You see, everything they do is on the foundation of you actually do have free will, but we're going to try to act like you don't. But hey, I'm going to try to convince you. Well, if I'm not convinced, then what? According to you guys' idea, I can't help that. Keep going with me. Coyne went on to say, as Anthony Casimir said, we have no more free will than a bowl of sugar. Coyne then added in his own words, we are bowls of sugar, just very complicated ones. Okay, here's what I'm trying to get you guys to see. And I think you can see it. This is obvious. That if you get rid of the idea of free will, which atheism has to do, then everything is morally permissible. And nobody can say what somebody else does is right and wrong. This is going to be the foundation for what you then are going to see in the next lesson that I'm going to do, where, okay, once you get rid of the idea that there's truth, and then you get rid of the idea that people even are supposed to respond to and assess their lives based on truth, what happens then? Well, I don't consider myself morally responsible because I don't have a choice. Said, I don't pick stuff. It picks me. Why am I here? Well, I don't know. As you look at that. From this simple analysis, surely it follows that individuals cannot logically be held responsible for their behavior. Why do you think Satan would wish that you didn't think you were logically responsible for your behavior? One of these days, you are going to stand before Jesus Christ, and he is going to demand that you present a defense is probably not the right word. An account. That's the right word. Appreciate it. You're going to give an account for what you have done in the body, whether good or bad. And you're not going to be able to blame your government for anything bad that you did. And your government's not going to be able to take any credit for anything good that you did. You won't be able to say, the woman that you gave me, the man that I was married to, but my children didn't. Where I went to school, they said. My culture on every television or video that I watch show said this. God demands that as a person created in his image, you choose this day whom you will serve. Whether the wrong ideas, now back in the Old Testament it was the gods, the false gods, the idols of your fathers, or the gods of the people in whose land you now dwell. You pick any of their false ideas you want. You can choose those. You can buy atheism if you want to. You can buy moral relativism if you want to. You can buy wrong religious teaching. You can pick any of them. But you're picking. And you are not a victim. And nobody's making you. And you're responsible. And until you internalize the fact that you're responsible, you won't live life like it's supposed to be lived. So you choose today whom you will serve. But don't you want to stand before the Creator and say, as for me and my house, we chose the Lord. We chose the truth. That's why I think you're here. And I appreciate that very much. And let's all recognize that the image of God is something that gives us value, it gives us responsibility, and it gives us purpose. Thank you very much.